Well, I think, tell you the truth, it hasn't really registered much on my radar over here, living in Wisconsin, of all places. But these kinds of stories are going to be popping up periodically because Donald Trump has unleashed a tremendous amount of hate and violence. And I think a more important story, frankly, is attack on the governor of Pennsylvania's house, Josh Shapiro, whose family was celebrating Passover, and someone threw an incendiary device, it was an arson, of the governor's mansion in Pennsylvania. To me, that seems like a very real and clear and present danger. And I would like to see our Attorney General of the United States take this kind of a threat very seriously, because I think those are kinds of political threats that are very real and are going to be multiplying all over this country, specifically and particularly if they're not going to be strongly and harshly addressed by our judicial system. Law and order, is very, very important. The fact that there's going to be people upset at every politician and that there's nobody who generates as much hate out there as Donald Trump is probably not a surprise even to Donald Trump. I think he would be probably the first one to admit that nobody has got more haters than he does. Well, he worked very hard for it, and he has a lifetime of achievement to show for the fact that there's people out there who are thinking of doing terrible things because of what is being done, and because of what is being the policies that are being unleashed. And we do live in a dangerous times because we also have a case of Luigi Mangione, who walked up to a CEO of a big health insurance corporation and killed him in plain sight. That is also something, and in that case, we see the Attorney General is actually asking for death penalty. So it's interesting that not all crimes are viewed with the same, with the same approach, the same attitude. And it's troubling, but I think that I'm glad that at least in this case, we see that our law enforcement did their job, and somebody was stopped and apprehended before they could go further with whatever evil plan they may have had. So I think that these types of situations are going to be typical, and we're going to hear about them. The concern is that one of these situations might get blown into as an excuse for potentially attempt at bigger repressions of people who may disagree with the policy of the administration. And that is what's, I think, truly troubling, because when we compare the rise to, the first few weeks of the Trump administration with the first few weeks of Hitler coming to power in Germany, one of the things that is remembered all the time is the fire of Reichstag, the German Congress. And having that be excuse for unleashing of mass repressions. There was a similar situation, I think, in almost every dictatorship, where at some point something is being used as an excuse to try to unleash mass repressions. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think in case of Trump administration, we also see how fragile and weak they are at stopping aggression if they're not dealing with somebody who is weaker than they are. And that seems to be a challenge for them. As far as, I think, dealing with individual evildoers, we still have a country that still has law and order, and we still have kind of police, and we still have courts. So I expect this person to get the treatment he deserves, like every other person in this country, and that he will be treated without any special view one way or another. I think that's the beauty. That's what America is supposed to be about, is that everybody gets a fair shot in court and can express and state their point of view. And sometimes that's already what we see Trump administration try to fight, where we see people who are just being accused of horrible crimes, and therefore they are not worthy of the due process. This seems beyond ridiculous and terrifying, and not just terrifying, because A country without due process is a country without laws, without constitution. And so I think fighting for the right of every person, no matter how horrendous crimes, whatever horrendous crimes they're accused of, that they have a fair shot in court is what every one of us needs to be assured that the system works and that we will have a fair shot in it should we ever find ourselves in that situation. I think that there's just some basic things about America that, thanks to Elon Musk and Donald Trump, seem to be a little forgotten sometimes, but they're still real, and reality is such that we still have courts and we still have law enforcement, and the story that you just shared, I think, is a testament and proof of that. Mm-hmm. Let me then interrupt you and say that I think that when it comes to assigning blame for these types of stories that, again, are going to pop up from time to time because of the damage that is the policy, the damage that is being done by Trump administration policy to Ukraine and to many other causes and people is such that it will drive people to do insane, evil things. That is, I think, something that people in America understand. We just don't know whenever we see another person go mad, if that person gone mad because of injustices that they've perceived on any number of issues. Maybe it was Ukraine. Maybe it was Palestine. Maybe it was veterans issues. Maybe it was something else. There's so many ways in which people of America are being hurt right now by this administration. And this wouldn't be even the first time when somebody who took the cause of Ukraine so seriously as to attempt to attack President Trump. We saw that whenever there was second, third, I get lost sometimes in these attempts on Donald Trump's life when there was a madman hiding in his golf course that was also upset about treatment of Ukraine. It's pretty clear that there's going to be crazy people out there. Sometimes they can even be elected president of the United States. But that doesn't mean that Ukraine is responsible. Now, Russia could be responsible for some of these things. And I think that Russia specializes, I mean, most people, in projection. So when they talk about how this is a fault of Ukraine, is what they really are trying to say is don't look at Russia, because it is so often and regularly exactly the fault of Russia. Because if it's not the person who was hired by them, it is a person who was funded by a cause that was funded by Russia, or some, the Russian money is floating around and is supporting all sorts of horrible things indirectly when it's not supporting horrible things directly. That really is such an important part about understanding Russian economy, which may be so small, but they're not using those resources to help people. They're using them to buy elected officials, to promote corruption, and to promote propaganda that can take any story and point blame at somebody that Russia doesn't like. And that can be Ukraine, it can be any number of places, depending on where Russian propaganda is angry. Although it is important to note that Russian propaganda has not been as angry as they've been at Ukraine for quite some time. I wonder what Ukraine did to piss off Russia so much. I wonder if it had something to do with independence, not following Europe instead of following Russia. Those are things that we sometimes just, again, basic facts of life that need to be acknowledged that help us understand new information. Because if we get this new information without any context and we just say, oh, look, there's this piece of information and these people on TV say this thing. Wow, and they have a pretty good studio over there where they're speaking on TV. It looks like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire or The Weakest Link. Always this bum, bum, bum. It's scary. But if we think and go, oh, this is Russia. That's Russian propaganda. Of course, they're going to. Who are they blaming? Ukraine? Oh, how unusual. That is so unique. Thank you so much. Is there anything else Ukraine did today to you, sir? Mr. Solovyov or whoever is spewing lies in front of propaganda for their paycheck? I mean, it's so obvious if we just buy into context, if we just accept and understand the context a little bit. So, yes, there's another bad thing that is happening in the United States. And of course, it's fault of Ukraine. How could it be anybody else? Do people understand what Trump is doing? No, not really. I think people would like to understand what Trump is doing so they could put their money to wherever it's better to put. because right now the big problem with the economy, with Trump, with all of that situation is that there's people who would like to invest their money in some place where they're going to get some return on their money, and instead they don't know what to do because we don't know what president is going to do in 3 months, in 2 weeks. Today, is he going to come up with some new exemptions, and what is that going to do? Now, people in America are also starting to come to a realization that this will open floodgates of corruption. Of course, because you have tariffs this way, tariffs that way. Who knows what tariffs are there? Who collected everything that needed to be collected? It's so complicated. Whenever there's complications, there's opportunities for corruption. Now, we in the United States have looked at the rest of the world and said, corrupt countries out there. You don't know. We can just, can't you just call police and get rid of your corruption? Silly people. But now we're starting to understand what it feels like to be in a corrupt environment where opportunities for self-enrichment. Oh, yes, perhaps later on something will change and there will be some kind of a retribution, but maybe not. And there will be a lot. We saw that during COVID, where lots of people took advantage of so-called easy money, only to be called on the carpet, so to say, afterwards. And we kind of saw who really bought into that free marshmallow and didn't wait. Although I'm sure that there's some people who are still yet to be prosecuted for things that they've done. I think that in the United States, we have people who are trying to fundamentally understand, is Donald Trump, is he a fool, or is he doing this on purpose? Because if he is a fool, then we're like in one kind of trouble. But if he's doing this on purpose, we're in a different kind of trouble. And how do we find this mix between, and it turns out that it's not even evidence-based anymore. Because we don't look at the facts and go, it doesn't even matter sometimes if he's doing this on purpose or if he's a fool. Because if he is a fool, then that's terrible. If he is doing it on purpose, that's terrible too. But then we go, does it mean that there should be some police that should be involved? Oh, wait, he put everybody in charge of everything. So he's safe. So he can do things. Of course, we go, wait a minute, there's elections, there's impeachment, there's what can we do to stop this madness? And of course, you have people who are, responding to this madness in a mad way. And that's where Russian propaganda kicks in. But the rest of the Americans are basically looking. Do you remember that? Some of your viewers may remember that photograph. It's not a meme, it's a photograph from 1953 when Stalin died, and there was a sign in a window of a restaurant, "Free borscht," on the fact of dictator's death. And I think that that's kind of the mood that is right now in the United States, where we are like preparing the soup, the stew for going, is he yet? Let's check the news. Is he still? He's still president? How interesting. Because I think a lot of Americans have never encountered such victory of evil over good. We've been taught by many books, religions, that the good will win. And then people see that Donald Trump won, that he is doing things that he is doing, and they're very confused. And so they're waiting for God to come anytime and to collect Donald Trump, because people are just kind of confused. How can this be happening? Well, this can be happening. This is life. This is reality. And there's about 25 to 30% of population in the United States who are very happy about this. And until those people will start to realize that all of these tariffs are not just going to hurt all Wall Street. Oh, who cares about Wall Street? We're here on Main Street. When people realize the connection between Wall Street and Main Street in their own wallets, and start to admit that voting for Donald Trump was a mistake, that's when we're going to start seeing some changes. Because until then, we're stuck in a kind of a weird situation where people who oppose Donald Trump continue to oppose Donald Trump. People who supported Donald Trump continue mostly to support Donald Trump. And people in the middle, well, they're just tearing their hair out, if they have any, because they thought that Trump was going to give them a 20% saving. They thought they were going to support a fascist and going to get a 20% saving discount. Well, they're not getting a discount, but they got a fascist. And so they're trying to figure out what to do. And then they're going, when is the next election? Oh, not for a while. Now what? Well, now we get to figure out what. So people are divided. People are kind of waiting and seeing for like what some kind of a higher form of justice is going to occur. Again, there's this big hope that somebody's going to fix it somehow for us. Someone's going to do it. And I think realization that we're just slowly arriving to is that we are the people we've been waiting for. Nobody else is going to do it. And we just need to take our country back one election at a time, one purchase at a time, one step, one day at a time. And that means that we're going to have politicians that are going to be speaking out. We're going to see economy that's collapsing as part of the fact that Americans have no faith in our in our economy, in our government, because when government acts in this in breaks in by breaking faith with people, it loses trust with people. And the Trump administration has lost just as much trust with Americans as it lost with people all over the world. Okay, maybe not quite as much, but really it's working very hard to just destroy any trust that there could be, and hope that we have competent people who have best interest of the United States at heart. We now have incompetent people who have their own best interests at heart, but are convinced that their interests and the interest of the United States is the same thing. And so people are coming to realization immigrant experience is very useful, because we have people from all over the world saying, this is what happened in my country. Hungary, yes, this is just like Hungary. Russia, just like Ukraine, yes, this is what Ukrainians say they've experienced in 2019 when Zelensky came to power. So there's all sorts of comparisons that people can make. But the thing is that unlike all those situations, there is no other America that's going to come in and it's going to save people. It's going to be like, oh, this is too much. This is too far. You got to stop this. That's not going to work. There's a couple of lessons there. First of all, that Donald Trump is a terrible negotiator. And he is not able to make deals. For anybody who thought that he can, please, please, please take a look at the news and you will see that he's not able to make any deals. Right now, we're going to see, I think, 90 examples of failure of his ability to make a deal, unless he postpones the 90 days postponement like nobody thought he would. Like, of course, he was going to, because when he gets backed into a corner, he makes up another deadline and he shifts responsibility and he shifts blame. We see this. You see, the problem for Donald Trump is that he's got a very small deck of cards, and he plays those cards the same way every time. Like when he dump somebody, he's going to cover them in dirt and then say bad things about them and then dump them. He did this about Ukraine. He did this about Voice of America. It just doesn't. He's got the same setup that he's going to play through every time. And I think that countries that have considered themselves to be allies of the United States now no longer really consider United States to be a reliable partner. And in this world where you have Russia that is being as aggressive as ever, and you have United States that's being, to say the least, as foolish as ever it's been, I think it gives a lot of it's a lot of opportunity for China, but not necessarily similarly to how Democrats are going to do well in the elections of 26. It's not necessarily because of anything that China is doing. It's what China is not doing and what Donald Trump is doing that is driving this whole dynamic, because everybody was living in the world that China was part of axis of evil, where you have China, North Korea, Russia, Iran. We know this. We've heard this for decades. But now it turns out that Russia can be, China can be more reliable partner than the United States when dealing with somebody with a threat like Russia. That even in that situation, China can remain enough of a stable and stability factor and stabilizing factor in this world that even their close relationship with Russia doesn't seem to be scaring people off anymore, simply because the United States is being so foolish about the way it is proceeding of treating its allies when it comes to trade, when it comes to politics, when it comes to defense. All of those issues to put together, China is starting to look better and better by doing nothing. And of course, this is because of Donald Trump. And how is this going to lead to anything better? And how is this going to? Right now, there's just a similarity. Donald Trump is so concerned about being in good terms and following in the shining path of Vladimir Putin. And the same way that Vladimir Putin is considered somebody that no reasonable statesman or woman would sign an agreement with of any kind, because Vladimir Trump, Donald Putin, doesn't follow what they say they will sign, what they've signed. The same problem we see with Donald Trump. Because he doesn't follow his agreements either. He can change his mind, and he can even criticize himself in the past, because he right now is so much better than he yesterday. It's absolutely crazy, and it's just a reminder that people who continue to choose to follow Donald Trump are believers, because there is no logic that underlines their thinking anymore. They are just believing, and that's actually seems to be the main defense argument of Trump supporters. Believe in Trump. Have faith in Trump. He's so smart. He's so darn genius that that if you can't see his plan, it's because it's your failure not to see the greatness of Trump. I believe that's how religions start. And we actually see that more people in Washington, D.C. around White House, apparently the latest trend during Bush years, Bush Jr. after 9/11, all politicians began to wear a flag pin. Either you're like wrapped in flag and you have the flag pin, or you're just not American enough. And it started with Republicans, and then Democrats caught on, and then eventually it went away. It's a trend. Right now, the trend is to wear not a flag button, but a Donald Trump, a yellow Donald Trump button. That's where the situation has reduced itself to. It's a cult of personality, a loyalty cult that at the same time is trying to be built in a country that is really not set up for it. United States, we're set up for trends. We're set up for different fashions. This fall fashion, this winter, but we're not set up for like a long-term dictatorship. We're just rotating way too fast for this kind of a dynamic to be set up. But we see people who are very interested in giving it a try. And that's people who have very little understanding of how America is, what America is about, but they do have enough of support to get started, and Trump was elected. So I think it is important to understand that he's legitimately elected president, and that means that he's not the fool. It's the people who voted for him that were being made into fools. And until they begin to realize that they were made fools of, we're going to be stuck in this difficult situation. I think Russian attacks on civilian population that killed everybody, including many children, are absolutely unconscionable. And I want to express my deepest, sincerest feeling of sorrow and condolence to everybody who was affected by this and whose loved ones were affected by this. This is a tragedy that is very much honored in Ukraine in a way that it is never honored in Russia, because in Russia they grieve about the tanks lost. They grieve about their units of military equipment destroyed. And Ukrainians care about people. And Ukrainians honor their people. I went to Ukraine in August, and I remember following a procession. Actually, what happened is we were driving on the road, and we were like going the other way of the procession, and all of a sudden I saw that the road was covered in flowers. And that's what happened, is the whole village town came out, and they kind of covered the last travel of this soldier's coffin, this body, by putting flowers on the ground, on the road. To me, that speaks so much of why people are fighting, and why Ukraine is in this war, and how they feel about this war. And it's very important for us to see it. The problem with seeing it is that when we see it, we immediately find ourselves on the outside of a Trump cult that requires people to poke their eyes out. And when you have a pastor, anybody, but particularly it's good to see a religious person, to a person of religious, to standing, to come to Ukraine, to see it with their own eyes. Of course, it's such a powerful experience that the person was not able to deny it. And basically, to me, that means that now he is on the outside of the inside joke that is the administration. Now he's going to be, he clearly showed that he does not see the world as Trump wants him to see the world. And he is now not going to be Trump's favorite pastor anymore. Because to imagine that Trump listens to a person of strong religious conviction for advice and guidance is ridiculous. Again, his idol, Putin, when he was asked by Tucker Carlson about his religion, his views and experience with God, Putin was like, I don't know, what are you talking about? He doesn't see God as being as a force in this world. Neither does Trump, because Trump believes in other things clearly, such as orange paint and value of it. But this pastor is now, I think, very importantly, first of all, huge thanks to him, because Pastor Father Burns, I'm not even sure what his proper title is, but the fact that he traveled to Ukraine, put his life in some level of jeopardy to see what is going on with his own eyes is so admirable and commendable, and I appreciate him for it. And I hope that as he shares his story, as more people have similar experiences and share their stories about what is really going on in Ukraine, then the stories that are being shared by propaganda and then repeated by this administration, Russian propaganda, and then repeated by American administration, which should make people think. It's like with tariffs. We talk about so many different things, but we talk less and less about the fact that one country avoided tariffs altogether. Russia. Let's not talk about things that are so unpleasant. So I will just say thank you to Father Burns, Pastor Burns, for traveling, and I hope that this represents a new beginning in the Republican Party, in a conservative movement, where the understanding that their faith, that their religion, that the things that Jesus Christ was preaching are not being followed by the current administration. Those are not values that are being promoted by this administration. And in fact, on the other hand, what we see from this administration are hypocritical and really dangerous statements, such as the one made by Secretary Rubio, who said that now people in the State Department are supposed to report on each other in cases of anti-Christian bias. To me, this is such an insult to Jesus Christ, and I don't even believe that he was a son of God. I just feel like this is an insult to anybody who ever tried to promote anything good in this world, to use their reputation and their name to promote doing horrible things like discriminating against people based on their religion, is an insult to any religion. And therefore, we should acknowledge that, and people of religion, should find themselves a different leader than Donald Trump, because I think Donald Trump is there's a sulfur smell and around him, and jokingly, not joking. I think that I think it should be so clear that Donald Trump is not leading people who are trying to get to a good place to where they're going, because he's not going to a good place. He's going to a place that's good for Donald Trump and not good for anybody else. And I wouldn't even want to be there.